The glass didn't just fall. It shattered, crystal exploding across the patio floor so violently that the entire backyard went silent. Not awkward quiet, not confused quiet, the kind of silence that only happens when a truth detonates in the middle of a lie. A second earlier, my brother had been laughing at me. "Let me guess," he'd said loudly enough for everyone near the grill to hear. "They called you Princess." I took a slow sip of sweet tea before answering. Havoc. That was it, one word. But the retired Navy SEAL standing by the outdoor bar dropped his drink like he'd seen a ghost. And in that moment, my family realized they had been laughing at the wrong person. Stay with me, because what happened later that night forced a powerful man to leave his own fundraiser under escort. My name is Aaron Caldwell. I'm 49 years old. I grow vegetables on 10 quiet acres outside San Antonio. Most people in my family describe me as the strange one, the one who never remarried, the one who doesn't talk about her time in the military, the one who disappears early from parties. They prefer it that way. It makes me easier to dismiss. The BBQ was supposed to be simple, my uncle's retirement party. Folding chairs, Texas brisket, country music low on old speakers. The kind of afternoon where people debate gas prices and high school football like nothing else in the world matters. I almost didn't go. I hadn't attended a family gathering in 5 years, not because I hated them, because I hated the version of me they believed in. By 3 o'clock, my brother Jason was already loud. He's 42, sells commercial roofing, thinks volume equals authority. He'd worked through 2 beers before I even set down the potato salad I brought. "Well, look who crawled out of hiding," he said when he saw me. A few cousins laughed. I smiled politely. I've learned silence unsettles louder people. Jason had always liked performing masculinity in public, and I had always been his favorite contrast. "Still playing soldier?" he asked after a while. "I was never playing," I replied calmly. That didn't land the way he expected. He smirked. "So what'd you do anyway? Filing paperwork? Organizing pens?" A few of his friends chuckled. The same predictable rhythm. Tease, laugh, repeat. I could have walked away. I probably should have. But sometimes after enough years of shrinking yourself, you get tired. "Ever actually fight anyone?" Jason asked. His tone had that edge, the one men use when they're daring you to step into their version of strength. "Only hand to hand," I said evenly. Knives were optional. The patio erupted in laughter. Jason slapped the table. "Oh, come on." He leaned closer. "Let me guess. They called you Princess?" I looked him directly in the eye. Havoc. The glass shattered a second later. Every head turned. The retired SEAL by the bar had gone pale, not impressed pale, haunted pale. He stepped forward slowly. "What did you just say?" "Havoc," I repeated. His jaw tightened. "Task Unit 7? I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. The entire backyard had gone still. My aunt stopped mid-sentence. The kids froze near the fence. Even Jason looked uncertain now. The SEAL took another step closer. "You ran Kandahar extraction in '04, he said, quietly. Not a question, a statement. Jason forced a laugh. "Okay, what's happening?" The SEAL didn't even look at him. He looked at me the way soldiers look at someone they once followed into hell. "They said you were dead," he whispered. I met his eyes. Not dead. His back straightened automatically. And in front of my entire family, he saluted. No one laughed after that. Not one person. Jason blinked. "Wait, what?" The SEAL finally turned toward Jason. "You have any idea who your sister is?" Jason opened his mouth, closed it, looked at me again like he was seeing a stranger. I hated attention, still do. But the silence had shifted. This wasn't mockery anymore. It was reckoning. The SEAL lowered his hand. "You flew black zone extractions when command ordered retreat." Jason frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said carefully, "when the sandstorm hit and everyone else pulled back, she didn't." The backyard felt smaller, the air heavier. I stared at the oak trees beyond the fence line. Old memories don't rush back. They settle. Slow, heavy, permanent. Jason cleared his throat. "So you, what, rescued people?" The SEAL's expression hardened. She landed in a kill zone no one else would touch. The word kill hung in the Texas air. I didn't look at anyone, because I already knew what would come next. The questions, the disbelief, the shift from teasing to uncomfortable curiosity. And then the SEAL said something that changed the temperature of the entire evening. "The commanding officer who abandoned that unit," he said quietly, "he's in Austin tonight." My stomach tightened. I hadn't heard that name in years. "He's speaking at the Veterans Fundraiser downtown," the SEAL continued, still telling a very different version of that mission. Jason swallowed. "So what are you saying?" The SEAL didn't answer him. He looked at me instead. "You ever going to correct the record?" I hadn't planned to. I'd spent 15 years disappearing on purpose. But hearing that name again, hearing that the man who buried the truth was still standing on stages, something old shifted inside me. If you've ever been underestimated, you already know that feeling. The one where silence stops being peace and starts being surrender. That fundraiser was only 40 minutes away, and for the first time in a long time, I was considering breaking my own rule about staying invisible. I didn't change clothes. I didn't rehearse anything. I just got in my truck. The retired SEAL, his name was Mark Delaney, followed behind me in his SUV without asking permission. Jason stayed at the BBQ. He didn't try to stop me. He didn't know how. The Austin Veterans Memorial Center glowed like a polished lie. Flags along the entrance, gold banners, black-tied donors sipping wine beneath soft chandelier light. The kind of room where patriotism is comfortable, where sacrifice is something you applaud, not something you survive. Mark caught my arm before we walked in. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "I know. But if you do," he added, "don't go in angry." "I'm not angry," I replied. That was true. Anger burns fast. What I carried was colder. Inside, Daniel Mercer stood near the stage. Silver hair, perfect posture, medals pinned precisely. He laughed easily while shaking hands with donors. He looked like stability. He looked like command. He looked like a man who had never once panicked in a sandstorm. He saw me almost immediately. His smile didn't fade. It froze, subtle, but real. Mark stepped beside me. "Evening, General." Mercer nodded stiffly. "Delaney." Then his eyes settled on me. "Miss Caldwell," he said smoothly. He didn't use my call sign. Not yet. "I wasn't expecting you," he added. "That's the point." The room began to quiet as the program started. People moved toward their tables. A master of ceremonies stepped to the microphone. "Tonight," he began warmly, "we honor leadership, courage, and decisive action under pressure." The irony was thick enough to taste. Mercer stepped onto the stage to applause. Standing ovation. Donors clapped enthusiastically. Younger veterans nodded respectfully. No one in that room knew what abandonment looked like in rotor wash and gunfire, except me and Mark. Mercer began his speech. He spoke beautifully. Duty, honor, chain of command, the necessity of difficult decisions, the burden of leadership. Then he said it. There are moments in combat where restraint saves lives. My jaw tightened. Mark's hands curled into fists beside me. Mercer continued. Sometimes withdrawing prevents greater tragedy. The room listened, trusted,
believed. He glanced toward the back of the ballroom, toward me. His eyes sharpened slightly. And occasionally, he added calmly, individuals act outside protocol, creating risk for everyone involved. There it was, the reframed version, the polished narrative. I felt every pair of eyes slowly shift toward our table. They didn't know why, but something in his tone invited attention. Mark stood up first. Chairs scraped quietly across polished flooring. "I was there," he said clearly. The microphone picked up the words. The room stilled. Mercer's expression tightened. "Delaney, this isn't—" "You ordered retreat," Mark interrupted. The silence thickened. "You left that unit." A murmur moved through the crowd. Mercer's voice hardened. "I followed strategic protocol." "No," said Mark firmly. "You panicked." That word landed like a hammer. Panic. All eyes shifted toward me now. I hadn't moved. I hadn't spoken. The master of ceremonies looked frozen. The donors looked confused. Veterans near the front leaned forward slightly, because older soldiers recognize when something real is happening. Mercer straightened. "There were intelligence variables you weren't privy to." I finally stood. The movement alone pulled the entire room's focus. "There were men on the ground," I said evenly. "My crew heard them over comms." Mercer didn't look at me. He looked at the audience. "You disobeyed direct orders." "Yes." "And endangered assets?" "I rescued people." Silence wrapped the ballroom. "You jeopardized the operation," Mercer pressed. I stepped closer to the aisle. The operation had already failed. A veteran in the second row rose slowly, then another, then a Marine with a prosthetic leg near the sidewall. One by one, recognition, memory, witness. "They told us nobody was coming," one man said quietly. "But she landed anyway." The room shifted again, this time permanently. Mercer's composure began to fracture. He hadn't expected corroboration. He hadn't expected faces. "You're rewriting history," he snapped. "No," I said calmly. "You did that first." Phones were recording now, not aggressively, just instinctively. Truth attracts documentation. Mercer lowered his voice. "This is not the venue. You chose the venue. You chose to speak about restraint. You called it strategic withdrawal. It was abandonment." The word hit harder than panic. Abandonment. Because it stripped away professionalism and revealed fear. The master of ceremonies tried to regain control. "Perhaps we can continue this privately." "No," Mark said sharply. "Let it stay public." Mercer looked toward the exit, calculating, weighing damage. For the first time all night, he looked unsure. And that's when the final piece shifted. A woman near the front, late 70s, stood trembling. "My son was in that unit," she said. Her voice shook. "He told me someone came back for them." She looked directly at me. "Was it you?" The room held its breath. And I realized something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. For them. Not me. "Yes," I said softly. The woman began to cry. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly. Mercer stepped down from the stage without finishing his speech. No applause, no music. Just the sound of dress shoes moving quickly across polished floor. Security didn't escort him. He left on his own. The fundraiser didn't resume. It dissolved. Clusters of conversation, whispers, questions. Recognition spreading faster than control. Mark exhaled slowly beside me. "You just detonated a career." I shook my head. "No." He did that 20 years ago. But here's the part no one saw coming. The consequences didn't stop at humiliation, because the Kandahar files had been partially declassified the year before, and now there were witnesses, public ones. The following morning, veteran networks began sharing footage, news outlets requested comment, old records resurfaced, and the narrative Mercer had polished for 2 decades began to crack. I didn't give interviews, I didn't chase headlines. I went home, back to my garden, back to quiet. But sometimes silence after truth is louder than any speech. And 3 days later,
3 days after the fundraiser, my phone rang at 7:12 in the morning. Unknown number, Washington, D.C. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. "Miss Caldwell?" the voice asked. Calm, official. "Yes?" "This is the Office of Military Review and Historical Integrity." That title alone told me something had shifted. They weren't calling to scold me, they were calling to reopen something. "We've received multiple testimonies regarding Kandahar Extraction Unit 7, the voice continued. We're conducting a formal reassessment of the operational record. Formal reassessment. 20 years too late. But not useless. I stepped out onto my back porch while they explained the process. Independent veteran statements, declassified communications, flight logs, command transcripts. The pieces had been scattered for years. Now they were aligning. "You are not under review," the official added carefully. "The review concerns command decisions." Command decisions. Polite phrasing for abandonment. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I just leaned against the porch railing and let the Texas sun warm my face. For the first time in 2 decades, the truth wasn't mine alone. By the end of the week, veteran networks had circulated the footage from the fundraiser. Mark's voice, the Marine's testimony, the mother in the front row, my single word, abandonment. Daniel Mercer released a statement, short, strategic. Operational decisions were made under extreme conditions. No apology, no acknowledgement, just distance. But the review moved forward anyway, because institutions may protect themselves, but they protect documentation more. And documentation doesn't bend under ego. 2 months later, the official findings were published. They didn't use dramatic language, they never do. But the conclusion was clear. Command withdrawal was premature. Field extraction was justified. Disciplinary record for pilot Aaron Caldwell was improperly influenced by command bias. Improperly influenced. That's how the military says, "You were right." They offered to amend my record formally, to correct citations, to adjust commendations, to issue public acknowledgement. I declined the ceremony, accepted the correction, and requested one thing only: the record for every aircrew member on that mission be amended as well, because no one flies alone. Daniel Mercer retired quietly within the year. No scandal headline, no dramatic downfall, just absence. Removed from advisory boards, removed from speaking circuits, removed from relevance. He never called me, he never apologized, but he didn't need to. Consequences arrived without his consent. Mark visited one evening months later. We sat on the porch watching the sky turn amber over the fields. "You could have burned him publicly," he said. "I didn't want revenge," I replied. "What did you want?" I thought about that, about the years I spent shrinking at family parties, about the word princess, about the glass shattering. "Accuracy," I said finally. Jason came by too. He didn't joke, didn't posture. He brought barbecue and awkward silence. "I didn't know," he admitted. "I know." He nodded slowly. "Still mad?" "No." That surprised him. "I'm not mad," I repeated. "Just done pretending." He stayed for dinner.
For the first time in years, we spoke like adults, not competitors, not stereotypes, just siblings. Because sometimes exposure changes more than reputations, it changes perspective. The next family gathering felt different. Not dramatic, not reverent, just respectful. Jason didn't tease. My aunt didn't whisper. No one asked about my call sign. They didn't need to. They'd seen it land. They called me princess. They thought I was exaggerating. They thought silence meant insignificance. They were wrong. I never wanted to be feared. I never needed to be worshipped. I just wanted the truth to exist outside my own memory. Underestimation isn't an insult, it's an opportunity. And sometimes, the loudest correction is simply refusing to shrink. If someone ever dismissed you because it was easier than understanding you, let them. And when the moment comes, speak once, calmly, clearly, and let the truth do the rest. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who's still carrying their own silent battle. And remember, the strongest people aren't the ones who shout. They're the ones who survive and choose not to become bitter.